Hello and welcome to Cars, Bikes and Conversation on Express Drives. And today I have with me Mr. Shashank Srivastava, who's the Senior Executive Director at Maruti Suzuki. And why we're talking to Shashank today is because this car here is celebrating its 40th birthday. It's been 40 years since the first Maruti Suzuki rolled off the assembly lines in Delhi. And from there till now, it's been a huge journey for the company. And today, the company claims to be a leader in SUVs. So, Shashank, how has this change come about from being a leader in the small car segment to a leader in SUVs now?
Well, frankly, I don't see any contradiction in this direction. Remember when the 800 was launched, which was like 40 years back, the GDP per capita for our country was less than $500. Today it is close to about $2,700. The market at that time was very small. The purchase criteria for consumers at that time was largely functionality. So it was obvious that a car like Maruti 800 was what was the requirement of consumers. Subsequently, of course, our economies grew. The globalization, this effect also reflected in consumer choices. The buying criteria shifted for many people, and not all, but many people, from functionality to aspiration, from pure price to performance, from functionality or just going from A to B. It is also a reflection of what you stand for. So it is generally this is how the economies and the auto industry of countries progress. As and when the economy grows, there is a change in the consumer mindset, and that mindset change, along with the volume change, reflects in the choice that consumers make for the cars, and that's what you are seeing today from the 800 to the SUVs. And this has happened rapidly in the last 5-6 years. And of course, previous to that, there was a movement towards sedan. In fact, in 2014-15, the sedan market was about 25% of the passenger vehicle market. SUVs at that time were just about 4%. Now it's like the SUVs are 50% plus, and the sedans are less than 10%. And there is a drop in hatch also. From around 46% it was 5-6 years back to less than 30% today.
27%.
So really the transition, to my mind, is simply the transition of the consumer. And Maruti Suzuki, as I've always said, is a consumer-centric organization.
Yeah.
And whatever is the requirement of the consumer is what Maruti Suzuki will do. And hence we came into the SUV. And you said Maruti claims to be number one SUV. We are actually the number one SUV maker. If you look at the H1, we go by the financial year. Yeah. And of course, we launched the Fronx, the Jimney in April onwards, April and May. And last year, the Grand Vitara, and also the new Breza. So these four SUVs together are giving us that volume of about 45,000 units a month. Right. And that's what has made us the number one manufacturer SUVs in H1, and also our market share, which was 10.5% last year in SUVs. In fact, Q1 of last year was just 8%. It's now between 21-22%, so it's more than double. This is simply a reflection of the consumer's choices, which Maruti Suzuki followed. And of course, the real question is if it should have been anticipated. That's a different question. But that's what has enabled us to get to the volumes today, and it's become critical for us.
I mean, you were a little reactive in nature to this SUV trend because your SUVs came in slightly later in the market. But that brings me to the other thing. When you thought small car, I mean, you all were the leaders. You all had over 50% market share in the small car market, right? The Alto 800, the Maruti 800 first, and then the Alto 800, it was the leader for many, many years. But now it's not even in the top 10. You know, the Alto has kind of dropped off the charts, and people are buying into a segment higher. The top three cars are still Maruti. Yes, the WagonR, the Swift, and the Desire. but people are buying into a segment higher. So why do you think that is? Has consumer spending capability gone up, or is the desire to own a bigger, better car? What is it?
Yeah, so we'll just talk about the transition. However, let me react to that earlier comment you made about Maruti Suzuki following the trend of SUV. Actually, we were the first to bring in the SUV. So if you look at the entry SUV, for example, we brought the Breza, which was shown in the Auto Expo, if you remember, in 2012.
Yeah.
The actual vehicle came in 2016.
Yeah.
And that segment was about 2-3% of the market. And when the Breza came, it grew to about 16% of the market. There was no product in that category, by the way. So subsequently, it was followed because it became a very successful thing. Was followed by Sonnet, Venue, Punch,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Nexon, and so on. These came much later, by the way, than the,
No, I mean,
thing.
there are
Second,
lots of-
second on the mid SUV, we had the S Cross, which came in 2015,
Yes.
which was also actually, in some sense, not entirely, because you had the Scorpio there earlier, you had the Bolero there, which is also counted as mid SUV. But a modern mid SUV at that time was actually the S Cross. And it didn't do as well, probably because I think we positioned it as a crossover. But the other vehicles which have done very well, the Creta, the Seltos, they have Harrier, they have come much later.
Yeah.
So in that sense, maybe the pace at which SUV market developed was something which surprised us, because we didn't have enough products there. Not that it was not anticipated. The movement of SUVs was
very
anticipated, but the number of products which we should have brought were not. And now we are making the correction. On your question of the hatch segment, transitioning into something bigger and more, you mentioned about the Alto, for example, not in the top 10, you are right. Of course, that's largely because Alto 800 is no longer there. Alto 800 used to give us around 130,000 or 135,000 units. Last year itself was 130,000 plus, because we are selling about 10-12,000 Alto 800, which is not there now because of various reasons, including regulatory reasons. That's actually one big reason why Alto is not in the top 10. But nevertheless, there has been a shift away from hatches. And I would say that the shift is probably going to, it's possible for it to come back as well. And I'll explain that to you. The shift you are rightly saying is because the increased capability of consumers, the average income levels have gone up in the past few years. And the general trend for consumers is to want more features, which typically come in the higher cars. And as I said, the buying criteria seems to be shifting away from pure functionality. And you would see that transition therefore. And the entry SUV, though, many of these buyers have shifted there as well.
Yeah.
And that's because, the entry SUV, which is 4 meter below, gets that special GST rate. And now there is a huge overlap in the price points between a premium hatch, an entry sedan, and the entry SUV. So obviously the cross consideration across these segments have increased. And that's the reason why many of these buyers who were even first time buyers shifting to these models.
Right.
Although we have some research is suggesting that probably a lot of those buyers who were earlier buying hatches, they are not in the market today, because the affordability factor for hatches has come down. Which affordability factor means the rate at which prices have gone up in this segment.
Correct.
Remember, in this segment,
I mean, your Alto started at 2.5, and now when it was discontinued, it was around 5 lakhs.
Yes, absolutely. So in fact, 70% is the price hike in this hatch segment. 70% last 5 years, and the income levels haven't gone up in that ratio, and therefore this is called the affordability factor coming down, and that means that there is a decline in this segment. You might ask, why is the prices gone up by 70%? They haven't for the other parts of the other segments. And the reason is there are, of course, regulatory stringencies. which have made the smaller cars cope up more because in many of those features were already available. Material cost has gone up. People are asking for more features, including infotainment, even in smaller cars. And of course, the road tax and insurance has gone up in about 23 out of those 30 states. So a combination of these reasons have resulted in the higher price, and because affordability factor came down, the small cars. But tell you what, it's possible, and I mentioned that demographically, because India is 65% below 35 years of age, we have 45, 47% as first time buyers. You could see when the affordability factor gets better, which gets better actually when the economy grows, like we are growing, and when this segment of consumers also, and the prices don't go up as in the same ratio, you could actually see the reverse happening.
Speaking of prices, I just wanted to quickly ask you, your Jimny, you launched it, and then recently there's this price cut, and which is, I mean, it's kind of a clearance sale. Obviously, it's end of the year, and you're seeing a lot more people pick it up right now. Do you think you should have started off at this pricing maybe and then ramped it up?
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate going on the social media also on this. Actually, it's good that you asked me this question. It helps me clarify some of the myths around this. First of all, there is no price cut.
It's a discount. Yeah.
So there is a difference. A price cut is a price cut. A discount is a discount. Now, typically, what has happened in Jimny is that while the demand for automatic transmission is about 55% and 45% is manual transmission, the production has been the other way for us because of availability of automatic transmissions. And as a result, we saw the stock build up in the Jimny. And I must say that the retail sales in November was much below the expectation. And I'll come to that as well. The stock level in December has gone up. And typically what happens every year is that the OEMs and the channel partners don't want to carry stocks of the previous model year into the next year.
Yeah.
That's why you see huge discounts prevailing in the market across all models, across all
December,
OEMs. It is also the reason why the retail sales in December is generally one of the best. It's been the trend for the last 10-15 years. And the wholesale is generally the lowest. Because people don't want to add stock, and then you stop. And that's going to happen this December. Last year, the wholesale was 275,000 for 275,000 was the wholesale last year in December. The retail was 411,000. This year, wholesale expectedly would be around that 285,000, but probably retail will be more than last year, so 410,000 plus.
True.
So it is a regular phenomena. And that's the reason why you see this great offer. But you will see in January, the prices come back to the Now comes the earlier question of whether it was better to start with a low price and increase. Actually, it depends on obviously on the cost as well. All our Jimneys are four-wheel drive.
Yes.
When you look at, for example, our competitor product, there is a two-wheel drive, and they brought in the two-wheel drive at a price point, I think 1.5 to 2 lakh rupee less than the four-wheel drive.
Correct.
So we get this feedback because people often buy the Jimny not for its function but for its form, which is the shape, and you seem to be sporty, and Padosi will say he's a sporty guy, in the Jimny, although you are never wanting it to take it for off-roading. Right. But then when we discussed it internally, we thought that it's probably, if you get a two-wheel drive, it's going to compromise on the overall brand image globally for Jimny, and the returns may not be sufficient in volumes. So you may add a couple of thousands in your volumes, but then compromise long-term on your brand image. And that's something which therefore is unlikely to happen. But that's one feedback consumers have given. And of course, why don't you start with the low price? It's always not possible because there is a cost involved with the four-wheel drive, and there is we have a 5-door Jimny, as you know. If you see like to like with the competitor, 85% of the competitor vehicle is diesel. We are not in that segment. So it's actually really people say, from our side, if you look at it in a more than optimistic talk, is that if you look at a four-wheel drive such vehicle and compare with the competitor, four-wheel drive, and if also a petrol,
Right.
then our market share is 90% plus
Yes.
in this segment.
Yes.
So people say, no, you don't have a two-wheel, doesn't mean that market is, so you add the two-wheel. So if you have a four-wheel drive and a two-wheel drive in petrol, our market share is more than 50%.
Right.
Then they say, no, that petrol, aapke paas diesel nahi, you add diesel also. Then of course it becomes like almost like a tough thing, obviously.
No,
So there are multiple issues, and the good point is that this is since it's a lifestyle vehicle, it's still a developing.
But are you seeing like some kind of cannibalization within your own portfolio? Because like the Breza now and the Jimney, there's so much of overlap. And with this year-end discount going, do you see like maybe some customers moving from Breza to Jimney?
Possible, but I would say that the character of the vehicle is entirely different.
Yeah.
It's a largely a urban. The Breza is a techie sort of vehicle. We call it hot and techie Breza, as the tagline suggests. Whereas this one is like never turn back, which is it's like more for going places where nobody, where no car goes. So Jimny is in that sense different. And I think the customer profile also suggests there are two different. Jimny is more of an additional buy, never a first time buy. It's either an additional buy.
Yeah.
It's not also in many cases a replacement buy. But for Breza, there are a lot of people who are buying it as a first time.
Yeah.
There are also a lot of people who buy it as a replacement car.
Right.
Like they may be owning a Swift earlier or a i10 earlier. Now they buy the Breza.
Okay.
So it's not so much of an additional car buying as you see in Jimny. I think the product caters to two different type of consumers. But yes, I do admit there would be some sort of a overlap anyway.
Right. So that brings me to the next thing. Now, the next big thing from Maruti is likely to be the electrics. When you bring it in 2025, you showed the EVX at the Auto Expo. So when electrics do come in, between now and then, is there some way of maybe transitioning using hybrids? You have one hybrid platform already on the Grand Vitara, but do you think hybrids could come in a few more models, transition to EV, or should we just go to EV straight?
No, I think there will be a mix of technologies that will exist for a long time, not just transitioning.
Right.
So EVs, as I say, that there is a consensus in the industries that long term, probably in response to the regulatory requirements for emission, EVs would probably, there is a consensus, will be probably the mainstream. However, there is no consensus when it will be so. In fact, by 2030, our projections are that EVs will be roughly 20% of the market.
Yeah.
That is the rough projection that we have. In our portfolio, we have said 15% will be EV, 25% will be hybrid, and 60% will be a mix of flex fuel, biogas, the ethanol,
Dual
and
fuel,
the CNG and so on. CNG itself close to about 33-35%.
I think except for one model in your entire portfolio, every other model has a CNG variant.
There are three actually, which we have 14 out of 17. So we don't have in three models. Ciaz is one of them,
Right.
Jimny is one of them, and of course the Ignis. So these are the three
Right,
models
Ignis
where we don't have the CNG.
Forgetting the Ignis for some reason.
huh?
So I keep forgetting the Ignis for some reason. That was top of mind.
Yeah. So the point is that we see a mix of technology, and one of the big reasons why EVs penetration is still not big and is likely to remain muted for some time is that the charging infrastructure in our country is not so developed, and this is leading to what is called range anxiety among consumers, and also the cost of the EVs, the cost of acquisition is still high. And that's primarily because the battery cost is high. Battery cost is almost 50% of the cost of the EV. That means localization. And localization could be the way by which you bring down the battery cost.
You'll have a battery plant also. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so Suzuki has invested, plant invested 10,000 crore in battery and battery related components. And that should give us an edge, because it means that with increased localization, you could see a very competitive price and therefore cost of acquisition coming down and as has been found in historically by research, if you see in the different countries, the penetration of EVs, typically the flex point is around 4.55% of the market. Currently, EVs are 2.2% of the market in India. In fact, that's the projection for this entire calendar year as also the financial year. And hybrids with a much lesser number of models. We just have two, Invicto and the the High Rider in Toyota, and the High Cross. In the last 3 months, hybrids have outsold the EVs. So, although the projection for the entire year is that hybrids will be 2% of the market compared with the 2.2% for EVs. But if you see the last 3 months, actually hybrids have sold more. And that's because it doesn't have that infrastructure of charging problem.
Yeah, these are self-charging, so there's no problem.
And you just use the regenerative energy of the brakes, and that powers the battery. 40-50% of the time in a urban setting, it runs on a battery. It gives you that real good feel of a quiet drive, which the EVs offer, and therefore that's a great intermediate step, I would say. By the way, our targeted powertrain-wise sales for domestic in 2030 is 15%, as I said, was EVs, and 25% is hybrid. And we are targeting 3 million in 2030. So you can do your maths, about 7.5 lakh will come from hybrid. So you necessarily cannot sell it with obviously can't sell it with about 2 models. You should have more models, but of course, it's difficult for me to fix a timeline or specifically talk about. So there are
plans for more hybrids.
It's difficult for me to talk about specific product plans. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So one last question: 2023 appears to be the year of the SUV for you, because clearly, you've become the leader in SUVs. 2025 is going to be all about EVs, because the EVX would come in there. Whatever you're going to call it, then I don't know the name, but whatever you're going to call the vehicle. And typically when Maruti gets into a segment, that's when the segment grows. And I've seen this in history as well, where, your premium compact hatchbacks, there were other products which came in before, but when the Swift came in, that segment took off. Similarly with a couple of other segments as well. So would the same happen with EVs in 2025? Maybe. Between 2025 and now, there's one whole year. So what is the year 2024 looking like for you? What's it going to be?
I think it's the year of the rabbit, I think, in Chinese, this thing. But, we see continued traction for SUVs in 2024. Although I must say that the 2023, has been really unusual in volume terms. 4 million plus is the total sale, first time ever in the Indian PV industry. But more importantly and very interestingly, every month has been the highest ever. And pushed, obviously, because there were huge pending bookings because of semiconductor issues that have been taken care of. This is therefore an unusually high base on which I think growth.
It's with the economy as well. I mean, the stock market has been seeing high month after month.
Yes,
so
yes.
We're at one of the highest levels
now. Yes, absolutely. But of course, not every month in the stock market was the. So that is a different thing. Over this, I would assume that SUVs would continue for this thing. Our research shows it plateaus around 54%, 55%.
Right.
We are still at around 48.6 this year. So you could see another year. I know it's in Chinese, it's never like 1 year is always followed by something else. So there's a year of the rabbit, year of the rat, a year of the snake, and so on. But in this case, probably is going to be another year. But in powertrain terms, I can tell you, it could very well be the
shift to hybrids.
The year of that multi-train powertrain, and that's going to be the shift with CNG getting to about 25% already for us. Hybrids are growing for the industry.
Yeah.
CNG is going for the industry, by the way. It's 13.5%.
Right.
Diesel came down to 17.5. That's the expectation for December. So you can see it could be the year of multi-powertrain flourishing in India. Okay. And maybe subsequently we'll see how it goes.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Shashank. Thank you so much for joining us on Express Drive.
Thank you.
And for more such videos, stay tuned to the channel. Thanks for watching.